Hi, my name's Kevin Yor. I'm the creator of Flawless Ear Training. I wanted to go over some guidelines now that this course has been out for a while and I've been getting a lot of feedback from students. So, there are some changes to the way that you can approach this course, and they actually simplify how this course works. So, we're going to talk about how you should grade yourself, when you know to move on to a next lesson, and what to do if you encounter any difficulties in the course. I want to talk a little bit about when you know that you can move on in a lesson. I recommend that if you are able to take a lesson and get 100%, go ahead and move right on to the next lesson the next day. Don't do it the same day. Do it the next day. If you make any mistakes on the first lesson, then just go ahead and complete the lesson 3 days in a row. Now, it has to be consecutive days. If you are on lesson 1 and you make a few mistakes, then you don't go back on day 2. You have to take a day off. Then you still have to do 3 days in a row. But that's all you have to do. You just have to do 3 days in a row. But then if you take a break after day 3, like let's say you take 1 day, 2 day, or 3 days off before going to lesson 2, that's fine. As long as you're approaching this 3 days in a row for each lesson before you move on, you will develop a solid ear. The other thing I'll say about this is ideally you're practicing a minimum of 3 days a week, and preferably you're practicing more like 4 or 5 days a week, because it's that consistent practice that's really going to help develop the ear. I have found that taking 1 day off a week is a good idea. So a good schedule might be for you to go, if you get, let's just assume that you always make at least one mistake, which is pretty typical. Let's say that you take lesson 1, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then maybe you take Thursday off, and then you go Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for lesson 2. You could get 2 lessons done a week. If you're going really fast, then you get 100% on each one, maybe Monday through Friday. Although I have to tell you, if you're getting 100% on every lesson, I'd really like to know that, because that's pretty unusual. And that means you have a really incredible ear. But even if you are getting 100% on every lesson, you should still go through each lesson until you reach the point where it gets difficult and you start making mistakes. Because regardless of how good your ear is, the way this program is structured, it is just going to set you up with a positive and strong foundation that will make later ear training effective. Because we always skip steps in the ear training. We always don't take this incremental approach where it gradually gets more and more difficult. And then what happens is later on, when you're trying to hear chord progressions and you're trying to hear advanced harmonies in music, you can't do it because you have gaps in your foundational learning. So Unit 1 is about fixing that foundation. You'll find that Unit 2, 3, and 4 and later units go a little bit faster. But that's because the foundation is so important. So we spend a lot of time. There are almost twice as many lessons in Unit 1 as any of the other units. So this is a really important unit. Just take your time. Don't worry about how you're doing. The more relaxed you are when you're completing these exercises, the better. So to summarize, if you get 100%, you can do 1 lesson a day. If you miss any, even one question, then you need to do each lesson or whatever lesson you made a mistake on for 3 days consecutively. Then you can take a break if you want to, and then you can move on. And aim to get at least 3 to 5 days of ear training in a week for best results. You don't need to do it every day. A day off is actually beneficial. Let's talk about some tips based on some comments that I've been hearing and some information that I think is important to share. The first one is error correction. So the first day, you just go through, you take the quiz, you don't do any error correction, and you just see how well you can do. And then you put it away. Don't do it again that day. Let it rest. Come back the next day when you are rested. And then on day 2 and 3, if you need to do that because you made some mistakes, when you make an error, pause the video and go back 5 or 10 seconds so that you can hear the question again and so that you can hear the mistake you made. As long as in these 2 days where you're practicing, when you're repeating the lesson, you go back and you try and hear it the way it's supposed to be, then you are correcting your ear and you are making progress. So let's say you go back and you still can't hear it. Go ahead, and if this happens after the third day, leave a comment just so that I know and I can double check to make sure there's not some mistake with the audio, which there really shouldn't be, but this way I can double check. And I can also give you some tips if necessary to help you move forward. But the way this should work is if you go back and you even attempt to hear the mistake, just the attempt to hear the mistake, listening to something you got wrong and trying to hear it correctly, that will start to slowly help improve your ear and you will start to get better at these exercises. So error correction is probably the most important part because you do not have ear training unless you go back and correct your mistakes. That's really important. The second thing, if you're really having trouble, let's say you've done day 3, you've never been able to hear any of the corrections. You just can't understand why you got it wrong. It doesn't make sense to your ears. You can go ahead and use the playback controls if they're available, because not all audio players are going to allow you to use playback controls. But if you can, go ahead and slow it down to maybe half speed and then see if you can hear the mistake you're making. Because while I normally want you to go at the pace that I ask you to in the course, if you've hit day 3 and you're still not hearing your errors, that doesn't mean when you go through you get them correct. It means that you get everything right in the lesson, you get 100%. That's not what this means. What this means is when you're going through on day 3 and you are trying to correct your errors and you still can't hear the difference, that's when it's time to slow things down to see if you can hear the correct interval. And if not, contact me. The other thing is 1 a day. You do not need to do more than 1 of these exercises a day. I know it's tempting to do 1 in the morning, 1 at night. That would be a maximum that you should do, but you want to do it once, preferably at the start of your day or earlier in your day, and then you want to forget about it. You want to move on to performance. You want to do other musical activities. You want to play the piano, whatever instrument you play. You want to sing. You want to engage in musical activities. You want to listen to music. So ear training is a technique that allows you to develop the ear more quickly than you would if you were to just perform. Could you develop a really good ear by just being a performer? Yeah, if you practice and perform in the right way, you can. But ear training is sort of like, it's taking the bullet train as opposed to the bus, right? You'll go faster with proper technique and training than you will learning solely by playing. But there's only so much ear training you need a day. You really only need somewhere between about 30 minutes and an hour of ear training. Anything after that is overkill, and it doesn't really help produce any extra results. I did an entire thing once where I did this flawless ear training challenge where I did the entire first unit in 1 day. And while there were some interesting effects, long term, I don't think that doing it in 1 day was actually very effective. In fact, I've actually even noticed just going through this course as I'm editing it, I'm doing 1 a day, my ear is still getting better just from doing the exercises in unit 1. But it's because I'm doing 1 lesson a day and I am not oversaturating my ear. And I'm also correcting. I'm making little edits just to make the experience smoother for you. So 1 a day. You don't need to do 2. You don't need to do 3. I prefer you to take a marathon approach to this and not a sprint. We just want to take 1 a day. You get your ear trained in and you go about your life. You listen to music. You do whatever else it is you want to do in your life, right? The last thing I'll say is don't break up sections. There are some courses I have where, you can break up the sections. You can listen to a later section. So, for example, there's one drill that a lot of people have trouble with. It's chord or interval. Can you hear whether or not this is a chord or an interval? When I play them together, it's a little easier. But when I start to move around the keyboard, it starts to become difficult to determine, am I hearing a chord or just an interval? So some people will go and they'll just practice that over and over again, but that's not how this course works. This course doesn't work by saying, okay, you can come in on Monday, do the entire lesson, mark off the sections you had trouble with, and then on Tuesday, go back and just work on those sections you had trouble with. Everything in this course, everything that is presented in a single lesson is meant to be taken holistically. You have to take the entire thing. Even if everything else in the lesson seems just so ridiculously elementary and easy, it's, remember, foundational exercises. It's having an effect, but only when you do it cumulatively. If you only focus on the quarter interval exercise, chances are you're just going to memorize it, which is actually a benefit that I talk about, but you're not really going to get that much better at it. You see more long-lasting and more effective results long term if you just come back every day, press start at the beginning, and go through the entire lesson. That's the key here. And the other thing is, make sure you're doing these in one sitting. If you absolutely have to, you can't fit everything into one sitting per day, then it'd be better to break it up than not do it at all. But you're going to see the best results if you just come in and say, hey, I've got an hour for ear training. It only takes anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes to complete a lesson. Press play, focus, concentrate, really be absorbed and engaged in what you're doing, and then put it away and go about your life. That is the best way to approach this course. So that's what I would recommend to you. These are going to be the things that will honestly be my solution to you in most cases. Typically, when people say I'm having trouble, trust the process, complete the entire exercise, go back and just listen until you can hear any mistakes you made, hear why you made them. Sometimes what will happen is I will do something like this. I'll play a chord. I'll say, is that a chord or an interval? And you'll say an interval, and then I'll say chord, and you'll kind of play it back in your head, like, oh yeah, that was a chord. That's error correction. You don't need to go back at that point because you heard the mistake that you made. That's all that matters. That's why this is kind of flawless, because you can't really make mistakes. If you make mistakes, you just complete the exercise of 3 days. If you don't, you go on to the next one, and it just gradually develops your ear. And you're going to find some really interesting experiences that start to happen, especially when you start to get around unit 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So keep going. I'm here to help you if you need any help. But for the most part, these are the things that I'm going to approach first. If none of these things work for you and you're truly taking one lesson a day, you're making sure you hear, or at least try and hear, any mistakes you made, why you made them, and trying to hear them the correct way. If you've tried slowing it down, and if you're not breaking up the course into individual sections you're having difficulty with, you're taking it holistically. These are my kind of go-to troubleshooting points. But then sometimes you have something more advanced that I can help you with, or just confusion about instructions. I can help with that. So let's talk about some historical information, because right now, eventually this slide will be taken off. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm editing all of the exercises. The way this course worked was, initially when I created it, I didn't know if it was going to be that successful, but it was something I always wanted to do. And so I was putting it up on YouTube, and I was getting feedback from people, and this was after teaching university for almost a decade, teaching ear training to first year and graduate students. So I had a lot of experience teaching ear training, and I wanted to get this course out there. So I started to put it on YouTube as just sort of a free service. And because of that, because it was free, I wasn't really charging it, just putting it out there and just to let people kind of develop their ear with a nice free resource. I wasn't always able to complete one lesson every single day. And so some of the instructions, I would say, well, you can complete this lesson for up to 3 weeks and then you can move on. That was never how the course was designed, though. The course was always designed to come in every day, was actually the initial idea, where you'd come in every day, you'd complete one lesson, and then you go to the next one. It would be like me coming to your house every day and helping you practice. But then I realized actually 3 days is a magic number for people making mistakes. Anything past that, and you start to get stunted. Your growth stunts a little bit. You'll get better by practicing the same exercise, but it's not about perfection. It's about moving forward and getting new stimuli and hearing the same basic things in different ways. So what ended up happening is now I'm going through and I'm adjusting all the lessons. I'm removing any information about how long you should complete this test, because I used to say make sure you get 100%. So if you come across a lesson where it says get 100% before moving on, spend up to 3 weeks, anything that contradicts what I'm saying in this new tutorial, you can ignore that and refer to the information in this guide. Okay, this is what actually matters. So there's logic behind this, because the first unit is over 30 lessons. The second unit is about 15. The third unit is also about 15. So that's a total of 60 lessons. So we really do spend a minimum of 60 days reinforcing the idea of the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, and some of the other techniques we work on, such as chord progressions. You'll start learning that early in unit 2 and 3. And then we actually start in unit 1 as well. We start the prep for it. And you'll learn these basic techniques. But we reinforce and build on them for at least 60 days if you just take one lesson a day. And then the next level is, again, another 45 lessons. This is a massive course, and if you were to spend 3 weeks on each lesson, you'd never get through it. It would take you a very long time. So it's designed to be about a 1 to 2 year course where you can just come in and take these lessons daily. They slowly increase in difficulty, and as long as you're playing music and not following the instructions, as long as you are following the instructions and not overdoing this, you should do really well in this course. So that's kind of the reason for why there may be a difference in instructions, but you'll see over the coming weeks and months as I get all these lessons edited, a lot of those instructions are going to disappear, and this is the template. 1 day if you get 100%, 3 days if you make any mistakes. So if you have any questions, let me know. Enjoy the course. You can start following these guidelines right now, because I am currently in unit 4 and I almost have that done. So I'm way ahead of you. So it would be very unlikely if you're starting now, especially, for you to catch up with me, because you'd have to violate these rules and I'd have to stop working. So neither of those are going to happen. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy the course. And if you have the means, just make sure you set aside the time to work on these exercises. Again, 3 to 5 times a week is great. 6 days is optimal, because then you could do 2 lessons a week. All right. So keep going and let me know how you're doing. I love hearing any feedback, results, experiences you're having. It kind of motivates me a little bit to keep going. And I think it's helpful for other students to hear real reviews from actual students as well. And that's all for now. So I'll post another update if needed.